Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Vukpavlovich, and as always, I have my very good friend Russell Firestone here with me for what is the 12th broadcast of the Sophisticated Shut-In. It is the 12th and final broadcast of this particular stream of streams. Because we are indeed now on the 4th of May, no longer entirely shut in. Texas has eased some of the shelter-in-place rules and regulations. Businesses are slowly starting to open back up, the non-essential ones at any rate. And we are slowly coming out of it. So we thought that the shut-in element of the title is no longer really applicable. So fear not, Russell and I will continue making content, but you're going to have to give us a little bit to kind of reimagine it and dream it all up again. Tonight, we are going to discuss the differences in style, sort of, between Russell's tastes and my tastes for ourselves personally. How we, within this vast world of classic menswear, have kind of picked our own elements of it into our own individual styles. And that is to say, that's still a tiny sliver of what is possible in this vast world. And then after that, we have a very special surprise guest who will be kind of shedding a different perspective on all of this. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Yeah? Would you like to start describing, generally speaking, what I would love to hear is we've mentioned before, like a couple of public figures from decades past that you draw a lot of inspiration from. And I would love for you to mention those again, but more importantly, I would just like your own spin on where your style comes from, both historically and what about it appeals to you, and what ultimately, makes you make the choices that you do, both as far as your purchases and as far as how you combine these things and what it is. Just essentially describe your style.
All right. Well, start my my love of clothing. It started when I was pretty young. It's probably before I was even consciously aware of it. I just always liked, the aesthetics of just classic male attire. And I think that's because, I personally, when I grew up, I got into like old Hollywood real early.
Yep.
And everybody was just so much better dressed than they are in most movies nowadays. Plus, all those actors, singers, actors from that time period, a lot of how they were dressing on screen, that's also how they dressed off screen.
I don't mean to interject too much, but I was just reading about how a lot of these actors from their era, this is before, even in Hollywood, there was a costume department, and a lot of these actors in general just wore their own clothes.
Exactly. Yeah. And because of that, you were dealing with a lot of people who, like you said, it wasn't a costume. This is how they dressed, and this is how, they'd been around these clothes for a long period of time, and that has a big influence on how you dress. The more you dress and the more you play around with these things, the more your own personal style comes out, and it's more natural. But to go back, my grandfather was actually probably the first person who gave me a big appreciation of fine, classic menswear. And then from there, like I said, it kind of ballooned. I got more interested in it, the old Hollywood stuff. And then it's interesting. Whenever, like I said in a few videos back, when I got into, buying more classic menswear, Cary Grant has always been the guy that stuck with me as being extremely well dressed, and he was kind of an anchor point. He still is. I mean, still look at photos of him and how he dressed. He's always very, for the most part, very understated. And I think that you always are going to come off being well dressed the more understated you dress. But what's interesting, since you and I, have become friends and we've had conversations on this, is one time, because I'm always talking about Cary Grant, in his style with you, but you pointed out to me, well, you know what? It's like you actually are closer to Fred Astaire in a lot of ways.
That's also because, just how you move on the dance floor.
Oh, yeah, true. I wouldn't go that far, but yeah. But in other words, my influence, my take on it, it's probably very American, like you said. Like Ivy League looks, I'm into, which is funny. I don't think Fred Astaire was really into the Ivy look at all.
No, he was more
I agree with
on the peacock side of trad, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That overall, I'm very traditional. I like Ivy looks as well. And then I do like some British looks. I'm kind of, I guess I'm very American in my style. I'm kind of probably a little bit more dandy-ish, one might say, just how I normally will just, throw clothes together, than somebody who's like super trad.
Sure.
Or just somebody who's like
super Ivy, too.
Definitely more dandy-ish, like you say, than probably Cary Grant would have been.
But not Fred Astaire.
But yeah. But I do. I mean, I like hats. I'm very influenced, I think, kind of by the jazz age. Like people like, obviously, Sinatra. He was a big influence on me. He's a huge Sinatra fan.
Mm-hmm.
Bing Crosby, another one.
Nat King Cole, probably.
Who?
Nat King Cole.
Oh yeah, Nat King Cole. Yeah, just all those guys, those kind of crooners from that time period, and just other jazz musicians. I'm very influenced. I think that my appreciation for like Spectator shoes that we've talked about kind of comes out of that. So I have a very kind of early to mid-century American style, probably. I kind of start to fade out, probably 60s forward. I would say that's kind of, I don't really play around because like we've talked about, the suits started getting a little bit skinnier in the 60s, especially in the trousers.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to like fuller cuts and that sort of thing. I mean, it's just my preference. So, that's my style and kind of the history of where it's come from.
Okay. Very cool. Well, if I were to kind of take a similar approach to defining mine and how it evolved, it also started when I was young. And I remember it was probably around the 7th grade when I started taking an interest in small flourishes in how I wore clothes as a sign of individuality. And this is because I think in 7th grade, I started going to a Catholic school where there was a uniform. Mm. And I remember, we had to wear dark blue trousers. We could wear sneakers, but then it was either a yellow polo or a red polo, either short or long sleeve. And I remember in the winters, what I started doing, just as like a little, maybe my first instance of a sprezza, is I would wear a long sleeve polo and a long sleeve V-neck or crew neck sweater over it, and I would roll up the sleeves so that you could see the polo and the roll. So I would have a band of color, around my my arm. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that's probably the first time I can remember actively seeking to do something with clothing, period, as opposed to just putting them on. Right. And shortly after that, I got deeply into music. I'd already been playing piano for a long time, but then the rock and roll and post-punk bug hit. And I started playing guitar. This is a little later. This is probably in, I don't know, 9th grade maybe. Still in Catholic school. And I started listening to all sorts of musicians. And, one of the things about musicians is that a lot of fashion inspiration, not necessarily classic style, but fashion inspiration does come from that contemporary music world. And a lot of designers, fashion designers, take inspiration from whatever musicians might be wearing. Because, musicians are a kooky bunch and they experiment a lot. And I just remember getting into a whole bunch of different kinds of music, but noticing that certain musicians, the ones who come to mind are Leonard Cohen, Serge Gainsbourg, David Bowie is a big one. And now David Bowie is, completely all over the map and the epitome of someone who has at times dressed incredibly outlandishly, not at all classic, right? But in the mid to late 80s, which is what we're talking about here, he happened to be in an incredibly aggressive punk kind of band called Tin Machine, and they played really aggressive, abrasive music, and they were all in impeccable classic suits, right? And I thought to myself, why do these men look so much better than everybody else? And that's what started me on the path in interest to gain more knowledge about classic style. And I didn't start dressing that way for a long time. I just wanted to know about it. And it wasn't until really much later, in my early and mid 20s, when I moved to New York. And by the way, many watching this don't know this. Before I worked in menswear, I had a 2-decade career as a musician. I produced records, I engineered, I ran my own studio, I was a session musician, touring musician, played in a bunch of bands and all of that. And in certain bands where I thought it would be appropriate, I started wearing elements of classic style. Never really full-blown suits until one time when I was playing in a particular project, and I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his name. He's a fantastic person and a fantastic musician, fantastic drummer. I was playing in a project with a man named Jeff Lipstein, or Lipstein, I'm sorry. I don't remember how he prefers the pronunciation. And I noticed that he was always in a shirt and tie, And I asked him, because I was wearing a lot of ties and vests and stuff like that at that point, although I wasn't in that particular project. So I wanted to know, what led him to do this? Because everybody else was in T-shirts and worn jeans, even within the same band, right? But he was always in a tie and a shirt and a sports coat. And I asked him, what? I mean, I love the way you dress, but what made you decide to do this in our industry? And he answered in a way that completely changed my outlook on menswear. And indeed, it harkens to something that we talk about quite often, Russell, as far as where the state of classic menswear is today. He said, you know what? I go to all these major labels and all the businessmen, all the A&R men, everyone is wearing, leather pants and chains and leather jackets, and they're all trying to look like rock stars, and they're just businessmen and lawyers. So I said, okay, if you're going to dress like I'm supposed to dress, I'm going to dress like you're supposed to dress. So he started dressing like he thought that the business side of the industry should be, especially according to how they used to dress. It wasn't really until, I don't know, the 90s probably, where it became the norm for everyone in the industry to dress like Lemmy from Motorhead. So that's, kind of the evolution of my interest in menswear. Now, as far as my own style today, I would say that there are 2 points with some overlap and stuff in between, but really 2 anchors that don't meet often, which is funny because in an interview years and years ago when I was asked to describe my guitar style, I said that my style goes between 2 points with nothing in between. One is melodramatic, grandiose beauty, and the other one is shrill annoyance. Likewise, there are 2 anchoring sides, I think, to my menswear. One is a very, very stodgy, stuffy, British-inspired look, very, very old school. As I mentioned, I don't own any shoes that even has broguing in it. I mean, we're talking stuffy, right? It's only recently that I've even considered wearing anything other than a white pocket square, and then the other end is, Southern European, Mediterranean gigolo. And I believe that this outfit, you don't see it, but I've got blue bit loafers, ostrich skin bit loafers on, and some tan linen pants. This is a linen shirt. I've got the neckerchief. This is to me a perfect example of that style. That's kind of my story.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting how, those are, like you said, they're 2 opposite ends of the spectrum for most people.
Well, I wouldn't say for most
people. At times, your whatever you want to call it, your profile picture on Capra's website. I mean,
which is also my profile picture on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's the epitome of that.
That's about
that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which I love. I love that.
Oh, me too. Obviously, I love it. Yeah. Sure. But then, I am a Southern, I am a Mediterranean. I spent all my summers in my youth on the Adriatic Sea. It's what it is down there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and too, I think, for somebody who's looking just to dress well,
but relaxed.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe this is a whole other conversation I don't want to get into right now, but I was going to say, just that classic, just understated, simple, that stuffy British look. I mean, it's not that difficult.
No, it's very, very easy.
Yeah. The casual side actually is where you start introducing more difficulty in dressing.
I agree.
Yeah. But I think that's where my personal affinity for kind of some of the looks I like is it's, be a little bit more fun, a little bit more stimulating for the imagination, to put these things together.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, having that foundation and that groundwork of a very stuffy British-inspired style is, to me, a great comfort because, I feel like I need to dress stylishly every day at work because of what I do. And there are mornings, believe it or not, where I just don't want to think about it.
Oh yeah.
And that's when that foundation comes into play, because then I just put on an old man suit and a white shirt and a simple tie and a white handkerchief and
You're done.
some damn black Capto Oxfords, and I'm good to go. You know, I don't have to think about it. When I want to think about it, I got plenty in my closet to have more fun with. But we've mentioned this time and time again. If you want to look good without having to think about it, the classic wardrobe is by far and away the best way to go.
That's it. And then like you're saying, you can throw in through time so easily, like what you've got on there. I mean, you can add accessories and that sort of thing to a classic wardrobe that allow you to change it significantly without having to invest in the whole other wardrobe, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, even with we've mentioned this before, even with those really classically styled suits, you can literally throw on sneakers and a t-shirt underneath, and you know, all of a sudden you're like hip. For lack of a better word. Do people even say hip? I don't think they do. Well, all right. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we do the big reveal?
The only thing I'll add, I don't think I actually described what I was wearing tonight. It's actually very Ivy League look inspired. I've got my loafers on, my khaki chinos. I'm actually wearing a belt, believe it or not. Yeah, I know.
I mean, belts are pretty Ivy.
Yeah. And then, of course, just navy blazer, striped tie, British stripes, though, not American. So that kind of throws it off. It's my nod to the East.
To true tradition.
Yeah, and I got just kind of an ivory pocket square going here in it's not an Oxford cloth shirt, but it is a button-down shirt, blue button-down.
Is it more of a twill or a broadcloth?
What's that?
Is it more like a twill or broadcloth?
Yes. Yeah, it's broadcloth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice.
But, you know, very, very American look overall. Ivy, very Ivy.
Oh, yes. Well, it's those chinos that button-down collar.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and that's another one of my probably more American preferences is that, I mean, this is a button-down, but just generally a more narrower spread on my collars, just more traditional American. Appeals to me personally more than a British wider spread.
It also speaks to the divergence in our general preferences in the sense that you tend to veer more in the direction of sport coat and slacks, where I tend to veer for my tailored looks more in the direction of a nested suit. And I feel that button-down collar works especially well with a blazer or sports coat and slack combo.
True.
Whereas a non-button-down, to me, works really especially well. I mean, you can do either or, right, in either situation, but I like a traditional non-button-down collar with a nested suit. But that's just my own preference.
Yeah, no, we're in total agreement there. That just with the suit, the button-down collar, I know people do it. And
I mean, it's not, if you're a senator from the American Northeast, like it's basically a requirement.
Yeah. But I don't know. That's where I tend to become more British, probably. There's something off about it to me. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I'll think of something. No, not right now. Nothing at the moment.
All right. Is our guest ready?
She is.
All right. Well, why don't you vacate your space so that I can get to the real meat and potatoes of
Real show, yeah, what everybody wants to see, not me.
exactly.
All right, this is Charlotte, everyone. I will trade places.
Right.
Hey,
Hello.
Charlotte.
Hiya.
How are you?
Regards.
First and foremost, everyone please meet Ms. Charlotte Simpson, who is an absolutely fantastic person. And indeed, the idea for what we are about to do came directly from her. So first of all, I want to thank you for both coming up with the idea and then being here and following through on it.
No problem. I thought some femininity was in order.
Always. Everything is made better by such things. So to make a proper introduction, Charlotte, aside from being a friend, is Russell is her partner, and I thought her idea was excellent because of many things, but in my particular case, we have a unique opportunity to speak with a very considered, intelligent, stylish person who also is partners with a similar person. And in this day and age, that's very rare. It's usually in a relationship, one person has such pursuits, and they either might urge the other to pursue these things, or maybe some don't care. But sometimes when you go out, one person is like, "Oh, honey, shouldn't you get a little more dressed up?" And somehow, I really doubt that's an issue with you guys.
That's
right?
true. I do not dress Russell, despite what a lot of people might think, because he does dress well, and it usually, it might be the woman saying, "Please dress nicer," but no, I don't ever have to ask him to dress or change his appearance at all. In fact, sometimes he chooses things that I wouldn't necessarily think would look good, but then when he puts it all together, it just works. So it's kind of nice to have that surprise on a date night.
Oh, for sure. That is definitely one of Russell's many talents. He has a very, very, not only just a keen eye for combining things that others would not think of, but then the confidence and the elegance to pull it off effortlessly. So, because the way he behaves when he's in these kinds of outfits isn't like, "Oh, look at what I put together." Right. He's just getting on with his life. That's definitely a point of admiration when it comes to how I look at his style. So I wanted to just ask you a few things, and feel free to be as elaborate or not in your replies. So what you yourself have a very well-developed sense of style, and I hang out with Russell a lot more than I hang out with you, which is a shame. But whenever all of us do see each other, I would say you tend to be also in very classically inspired ensembles. Is that something that has always been a point of interest for you, or is it something that you've been more interested since being with Russell? Like, where exactly for you does that come from?
I think it's also always been a part of me in my just way of being. I think what you guys were saying earlier is the same for me. I like simplicity. I don't want to have to think about it. And though I think a lot of people see a well-dressed couple who must have spent a lot of time and effort, it's actually, I think, the opposite. I think, I find a dress style that fits my body type well. And I like simple patterns. I don't want to have to think too much about it. I just I find just simple dresses that suit me well, and I like pearls. I like certain things, and I just have a collection of the things that I like, and I can combine them easily and simply.
Do you have any style icons or inspirations, or is it just stuff that you find yourself?
I think it's stuff I find myself, though, of course, Grace Kelly, would be anyone's style icon. But I think it may be slightly different for a woman, maybe not. But, you have to find what fits well on your body. And so even if I were to admire a woman, if she's not my body type or size, or, then,
Sure.
you have to find what works for you. And so, yeah,
Most
um,
definitely.
I guess Grace Kelly would probably be the one if I had to answer.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So, is there anything else that you would like to say about your style and your relation to style before I start asking you questions about what you think of Russell's?
No, I think my style is pretty simple. We can move on to
Okay.
Russell.
So, let's first talk very, very generally. What type of outfits and combinations do you most favor on Russell? Like just either just looking at them, or maybe when you go out, what do you like to have on your arm as your counterpart?
My eye candy, my
Yes,
um,
arm candy. Yeah.
my arm candy, yeah.
Yeah.
He, I think there are a couple different styles that he wears that I like. One is like he was saying, the classic American traditional style, just clean and put together. Speaking of clean, good hygiene is really just, I love that Russell wears nice fragrances subtly. He'll wear a nice, florist British fragrance, kind of understated, or, he has several that he wears. So that is a piece that I like about him. It kind of goes along with what he's wearing. He's wearing the fragrance as well. And he's always clean shaven, and that's always nice. And so the well-groomed is a part of it. The American traditional style, just the simple, just he looks good. He just looks well put together. And then the other piece that I like is his kind of tweed British country style.
Yes.
And maybe I'm partial to that, but if we go out to a winery or have a picnic or something like that, it's nice that he wears that sort of country British look. It goes with the feel of the moment.
One thing that, well, I have a lot of things to say about Russell in perpetuity, but one of those things is that here is a man where you would be very, very hard pressed to throw an event or activity at him for which he is not prepared to dress.
Yes.
And that is very, very, very commendable.
Yes.
Like, this is a guy who's like, oh, you are asking him to go hunt pheasants. He's good to go.
He is. He could easily, yeah.
And he'll outdress everyone there.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
like to go to the Austin Summer Classic Film Series at the Paramount, and he always has the right outfit for the movie as well.
Oh,
so,
yeah, no, it goes very deep. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, very cool.
And he also always has the right song for the moment too. That's another thing separate from men's clothing, but it all kind of goes together, I think.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's all just the knowledge of the classic lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's in general what appeals to you. Are there specific outfits that come to mind that he has worn to specific occasions that you have appreciated because of whatever reason?
Yeah, not necessarily the entire outfit, but there are certain accessories that I really like that he chooses. And there's Russell, could you get some of your belts that you I
Oh,
yeah, I forgot about those. I put together I have some ties.
Okay, perfect.
And so one of these, this is, I don't know if you can see it in the lighting, but it's a kind of a dark maroon plum color. But it's just a solid color. It's actually very similar to my dress, so you probably can't see it. But it's a very simple, solid color, but it's a textured material.
Is it a
And
Robert Jensen grenadine?
yes,
It is. Okay.
it's the grenadine. Yeah, Robert Jensen. Yeah. And so it adds, you can wear just a simple solid color, but then play with patterning just through texture. And so I like that. So you can have just a solid tie with a texture and then do a patterned pocket square, or even a solid pocket square, but it just adds a little bit of pattern without it being too much. Same with this tie is very
Oh yeah, that's like probably a wool silk blend, I'm
yeah.
guessing.
What's that? It's cashmere.
Oh, cashmere. Okay,
Um,
beautiful.
it's also kind of a tan color, and it has a bit of a patterning to it, but not a lot. It's just it's kind of solid, but not quite. And so I like those sort of things that are understated, and so it adds to his look. This, I think it's this belt is my favorite of his. It has a bit of a stripe to it.
Okay.
And so it takes, if he's wearing khaki colored pants and a very simple, like a white top, then this belt, it just adds just enough unique flair without making it, you don't really know why he looks great. It's just that little stripe of belt that adds to the look. And same with this one. It's also just a leather belt, but it has a little like braid in the middle.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those like little subtle details in the accessories, I think I've realized, I think that those are the things about some of his outfits that draw my eye. And I think you're just wearing something very simple, button down shirt and pants,
Sure.
but it's the belt or the pocket square, the tie that kind of add to the look.
Oh, sure. And that's a great perspective because a man will almost always just be in a shirt and some kind of pants, right? But there are shirts and then there are shirts, right? And there are pants and then there are pants.
Right.
And, but beyond that, it's those little touches like you just mentioned, those little details that even subconsciously, I think, for people when they're looking at someone dressed like that, just indicate that that person actually thought about what they're wearing, as opposed to I put on some pants and a shirt, right? Which is more or less how most men, especially, and some women, I think, approach it. They wear what is reasonably clean that day, right? And they stop there. Whereas you're absolutely right, and that is yet another thing I admire about Russell's style, that those little details in his accessories really suggest that, because we've been together when Russell is just in like a very casual button-down shirt and maybe even jeans or khakis and whatnot. But so he's not really wearing anything different from what the current status quo is, except for that those pieces are impeccably tailored to his specifications, and those little details pull it all together. So yes. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or?
Um, I brought also this Spectator.
Oh yeah,
Russell loves his Spectators.
he does.
And, I used to think Spectators were, sometimes a little too flashy. You really have to wear them a certain way, I think, to pull it off. And Russell somehow has found a way to do that. And I think it is in those more subtle accessories and things, so that the Spectator, it's not one flash among many flashes. It's just a difference to his look overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that Russell wears that he pulls off magnificently, and I couldn't do in a billion years.
Yeah, it's a very specific style, but he does it. So yeah,
he does indeed. He does indeed. Anything else, or just, that's all been just absolutely wonderful and a wonderful insight.
Yeah, I think that's it. I hope that adds to the discussion and brings in a little feminine flair. And
I really think it has. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
All right, let's get
Russell
Charlotte
back
Simpson, everybody. Thank you, and let's get Russell back on camera. What's that?
I said round of applause.
Yes, yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That
was fantastic.
no, she did a great job.
She did a fantastic job, and really, highlighted a lot of things that, frankly, we haven't even thought to bring up. Like her perspective is. I don't know that it's necessarily because it's a feminine perspective, although I mean it is by design, right? But it's just a unique perspective that we haven't covered, just the two of us, and that was very, very cool.
Which is funny because how the belt came out in here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. I never would have thought to even talk about belt. What's a belt?
Yeah, I generally, most of the time, tend towards braces. I'll say that. But yeah, I know Charlotte, that one belt in particular, every time I wear that one, she really likes that belt.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I'm really glad that one of the things that she chose to highlight is the grenadine tie. We've talked about grenadine ties before. Grenadine is a knit silk tie. And even though they tend to be solid colors, though not necessarily always, I've seen them in broad stripes and stuff like that, but they do tend to be solid colored. It is that knit texture that allows them to be dressed either way up or way down. They can be dressed way up because they are solid colors. They can be dressed way down because they do have that texture, right? Which is, but because they are silk, that they can really be dressed up. Like my silver grenadine tie is probably my favorite cocktail attire tie, right? Whereas the other tie that she chose to highlight that was just as insightful was the cashmere. And yes, it is a textured tie that is more or less solid, although it seemed like there were, specks and flecks in there, right, of different tones. But it comes off as solid, right?
Herringbone tie.
What's that?
It was a herringbone.
Oh, it was a herringbone. Okay, perfect. So, a herringbone is a pattern, whereas a grenadine is a texture, right? And a herringbone, if it's fine enough, and it seemed like it was a pretty fine herringbone, right? From a few feet away will appear solid, right? But then as you approach it, the pattern reveals itself. But cashmere, because it is more of almost like a flanneled look, probably doesn't have quite the formality range as a grenadine. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
Like it will always come off as on the more casual side, and indeed even more so a more seasonal tie. This is a fall winter tie, right?
Right.
Whereas a grenadine is so versatile because it is knit. You can even wear it with like a sports shirt, button down collar and jeans, and like, you know, a totally casual, like Harrington jacket or a leather jacket or whatever, you know, and you can pull it off because of that texture if you got the guts to do it. But then again, you put it on a dark suit, you can go to a cocktail event with it, which is why, you know, we're joking before, like here at Capra, I'm like the Mother Teresa of grenadine ties. It's like when somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I need a tie," or when someone just asked me to put an outfit together, I'm like, "Have you heard, sir, of grenadine?" So that was very, very cool of her to highlight, and very insightful.
Oh yeah, I think both of us. I know you would, you know, and therefore I would too. Would urge somebody, especially, you know, if you're just getting into classic style. An easy way we've talked about before is kind of go with solids in the beginning, because when you start adding a pattern,
you can't mess it up.
Yeah, that's where some complexity can come in. But rather than just getting like a solid silk tie, the grenadine is a much better way to go, because you're still staying with that solid color, but the versatility of that tie is a lot higher than just a solid silk tie.
Absolutely. And from a functional point of view, like a purely mechanical point of view, that texture on a good grenadine tie is, once you tie that knot and you put it up to the neck and you place it perfectly, it is not slipping one bit, because that texture just grabs onto itself so well that that tie is not coming off until you decide that it's coming off. With some of the more slippery, you know, high gloss silk ties, they may look great, and with a high quality construction and inner lining, that knot will stay put. But with those ties, if I'm wearing one, you know, throughout the evening, I'm always kind of checking to make sure that it's staying in place. And, you know, that's just part of the deal. That's fine. But with a grenadine tie, I never feel like I have to.
Right. Oh yeah. Plus that if you like to get that deep dimple in your tie knot or right under it, oh man, those grenadines are perfect for that. They do that better than any other tie.
Absolutely. All right, sir. It's the end of an era, end of a series. Thank you very, very much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, it's been fun. Thank you, Charlotte, for.
Yes, thank you very much, Charlotte, for your wonderful insights.
Yeah, we'll be back, and you know, once we redo the set and retool and everything.
Yeah, of course. I mean, well, we have to bring, you know, the CGI team in and the full film crew. We can start bringing them back into the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Yeah.
No, that's right. So it may be a little while because, you know, I feel like we cranked out a lot of these, and frankly, we had the time on our hands to do it. Now, as things slowly start opening up and all of that, we'll be busier. So the broadcasts may not be as frequent, but we also need some time to, you know, as I said before, just come up with the new paradigm.
Sure.
So,
no, it's been fun though. Yeah.
Well,
it's been fun, and it's you know, this is something you and I could talk about forever.
oh, and we will.
Oh yeah.
Well, all right. With that, I want to thank everyone who has watched so far. You know, I've had a number of people well, reach out to me online on Facebook to talk about this series and encourage us and thank us. That's been wonderful. But in the last few days, since Capra and Cavelli has reopened, I've had also the pleasure of having some of our longtime clients come in and talk to me about how during this shutdown, the sophisticated shut-in has been one of the ways that they've helped pass the time and maybe learn a little something here and there. And that's been incredibly rewarding to hear. So I thank everyone for that. I thank you, Russell, for being my partner in all of this. I have to say that it's been a lot more fun, a lot easier, and I feel a lot more informative since you've joined on. And I want to also finally thank Charlotte for her guest appearance, and I want to thank my better half, Angela, for putting up with all of my productions at home. Today, we shot at my end here back at Capra and Cavelli. This is one of our custom stations. But for the most part, it's been in the...
in the next iteration of this, however it comes to be, now that you point out the books there behind you, we got to bring in the Carrie suit. Just as a little teaser for the future for everyone.
I think that between that and pinky rings, we've already got our next two topics in the can. Now all that's left is to figure out how we want to present and how we want to shoot it. To me, this Zoom thing is fantastic for two reasons. One is this time it was out of necessity because of social distancing, and it's kind of the order of the day. So that's been fantastic. But I have to say, going forward, there isn't a very appealing element to it because it doesn't require a crew. It doesn't require editing. It's informal and casual and, not like this hoity-toity big deal. So I don't know, like that's one thing we'll talk about probably off camera about how we want to proceed. But there are very, very appealing things about this format.
Yeah.
All right. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, it's been fun.
It has been fun. We'll see everyone soon. Thank you so much.
All right.